Representative Perillo.
Thank you, Senator. Thanks very much. First of all, congratulations. You've been in government here in the state for quite a while. To be named a commissioner must be quite an achievement and an honor for you. I can only imagine. So I congratulate you on that.
Thank you.
I don't necessarily envy you, but I congratulate you.
Thank you.
Last week, we spoke with the commissioner of the Department of Public Health, and I asked her about test kits. I asked her about photos of test kits and the assertion that there had been photos, which she addressed. In her answer to my question, she stated / implied that there was a contract in place. And I asked her about that. And, she sort of, rightfully or wrongfully, she sort of punted to DAS. So I just wanted to get your perspective on purchase orders, contracts, the difference between the two, what documentation was actually in place, and what assurances was the state actually given that we would be obtaining these tests.
Certainly. We've provided, and I again appreciate your question. And I just want to clarify that your question relates to the rapid test procurement around the holiday period. Okay. So, obviously that was an extremely challenging time for our state and our country at a time when Omicron was surging, in Connecticut in particular, at a very rapid pace and unanticipated escalation period, and then complicated by the holidays as well. So overall, under the executive authority with the governor, we had the ability to do some procurement on a rapid basis to respond to COVID. And the rapid test procurement fell under that limited executive authority. And so with the procurement team at DAS, we were able to not only source rapid tests at a fast pace, but also around or through our contracting standards that we have at DAS. So we certainly had some emergency contract authority that we needed to use, and we primarily initially used that with vendors that had offered direct line with manufacturers to receive tests. And then later on, we went directly to the manufacturers directly to acquire those tests. Finding through, the process, which all happened extremely quickly, that working with the manufacturers was really the best approach to move forward on acquiring those rapid tests and the volume that we needed at that time. So the procurement was done, in accordance with all of our processes and procedures, but through the emergency authority, we were able to ensure rapid contracts and appropriate contracts through our procurement division. I hope that answers the initial, breadth of your question. It was a very complex time, certainly a challenging time in terms of the procurement, but all done, according to our procurement standards, with the review of, all the different levels of government that are involved in that review.
No, and I appreciate that. And I can appreciate the complexity and the urgency, and again, complicated by the holidays. Nothing, goes according to plan in situations like that. But my question was whether or not there was a contract in place, because it was represented that there was. I don't know if you got to an answer on that. So was there actually a contract in place?
So we did have a contract in place. The purchase order inherently is the contract. But I think what's important to note is that no money was exchanged. And our contracting standards in Connecticut, unlike some other states and other entities, we do not prepay for services or goods before they arrive here. And so that was critical, for us, particularly at this complex time, this challenging time, to ensure that until the product arrived, on the ground of our state, arrived at our airports, arrived at our warehouse, that there would be no prepayment. And so at a time when other states were also dealing with promises of tests coming to them, they may have had situations where they prepaid for those orders. We did not and would not do that in accordance with our standards.
Okay, so your assertion is that a purchase order is the same as a contract? Yes, essentially, yes. And the seller had signed that purchase order as well?
Yes.
So there were signatures on behalf of both parties?
That's correct.
So what ended up happening? Did we just get outbid?
I think we were probably the victim of the markets at the time, and probably a number of factors of there not being enough supply to match the demand that we, along with other states, were seeing, and some bad actors probably in the process as well. And whether there are investigations taking place across the country with other states, with the federal government, et cetera, around price gouging, around commitments of product that did not exist. I think we'll see probably more of that to come. But the important thing is that we quickly moved away from sort of that that middle person model and working directly with the manufacturers to get the products that we needed. And then that worked extremely well for us, where we had that direct line to iHealth and other vendors that could provide the direct merchandise, the direct goods to us directly, and then meet our demands very quickly. And then, as you saw, we were then able to roll out those rapid test kits, very quickly, which was our goal, and obviously the governor's goal in terms of meeting the demand prior to the rollout of the federal program. And I think it's important to remember that the rapid test kit rollout around the holidays was really a supplement to all of the testing resources that we had in the state, the community testing program, the rapid test programs that you would see in retail environments, as well as the PCR testing offered by almost 400 sites across the state. Not to mention, the vaccine, and remind individuals about all of the different steps to take to avoid COVID infection.
So then you think that maybe the state sort of fell victim to bad actors, and that perhaps the test kits that we were promised didn't actually exist?
I think that's possible, and I hate to speculate, but I think we were not unlike other states, other entities, probably hospitals and community health centers and other entities across the country that were all looking for rapid test kits as Omicron escalated. And so I think it's probably likely that we did run into, some individuals that made pledges that they couldn't meet, whether that was intentional or whether, again, it was a product of the markets at the time where these tests were going out the door so rapidly. Those vendors were not prepared, to manage that inventory as they should have. So I can't speculate as to why it occurred, but I do know that our procurement team, which again was extraordinary and worked, over the holidays and quite literally on the holidays, and I think 18-hour days, worked very quickly to source goods and test kits that we knew were coming into the state and that we had a clear line of sight on. And primarily that was working directly with the manufacturer. And I give extraordinary credit to our procurement team, Jean Burke, who's the director of our team, for quickly moving to develop those relationships, which again, we saw the success of that effort, to then deploy, millions of rapid test kits to vulnerable communities, to our communities, to our schools, churches, and other entities that were in need of those rapid test kits to help supplement, the response at the time.
Yeah, there was a lot going on. So you don't think that we were outbid?
I don't know that it was a matter of price point. And again, our teams were very conscious of pricing. We were offered, test kits that we refused to pay the pricing that was offered to us. It was not something that we would entertain, and probably did, fall into the price gouging bucket. So we were very cautious about the the contracts that we would engage in or the purchase orders we would contemplate. But I can't speak to, all of the reasons why, that one vendor or two or some of those opportunities did not come to fruition. That's obviously on the side of the actual distributor or the manufacturer, the vendors. But I do know that we were very successful in, quickly turning the page and moving towards a different model so that we can meet the needs of the state.
And again, so that binding purchase order that you referenced, do you remember what the cost of the test kits was in that purchase order?
I do not, but I do know that overall, we were looking to, not pay, more than, $12, per kit, on average. And then there was a lot of conversation about, one test or two per kit. And there's a lot of confusion at the time of, those different kits that were available. Also making sure that the various kits were, clear in terms of their instruction and their, EUA suitability under the FDA. So a lot of considerations made to not only the price of the test, but also ensuring its suitability under CDC and FDA standards. So a lot of different guidelines that our procurement team looked at. But we could certainly get you more information on your specific question.
Now, so do you remember what we actually ended up paying?
I would have to go back and get those records for you. I don't remember the exact amount. And I think probably our CFO has now finalized many of our payments to, in particular, iHealth, but I'd have to go back to the team and ensure that most of these purchases as well are also covered under FEMA funding. So as much as we would have paid for that using general fund dollars now, we are applying for FEMA eligible funding at this point as well.
Do you remember if it was more or less than what we had originally contracted for in a purchase order? What we ended up paying?
I don't recall it, but we'd have to look back at that on a purchase order by purchase order basis. We really were working with several different vendors at the time. So I would need a little bit more information in terms of which vendor you're speaking to. Okay,
understood. And I know you were sort of in the thick of it, and you even mentioned previously that the primary focus of your work, December of 2021, really was, COVID and the testing. So I can understand there were a lot of things going on, and maybe you don't recall. I can appreciate that.
Yeah, but we can provide you with vouchers and certainly the payment schedules and where we are on that. Happy to provide that to you.
Oh, sure. No, I appreciate that. I appreciate that. Now, I do have a few more questions as it relates to school construction. And if I ask a question that you're not comfortable answering or can't answer, due to any ongoing criminal investigations, just tell me and I'll stop.
Thank you so much.
When did you first become aware of concerns regarding school construction?
And can you expand on that in terms
Sure.
of, okay.
Yep, absolutely. I mean, so we in the general public basically became aware when the press reported it. Mm-hmm. You sort of had a bit of a front row seat as deputy COO, and of course now at DAS, but you had been at DAS previously. When did you personally become aware?
I think honestly, when the news hit in October that the school construction program was under review and was being moved back to OPM, back to DAS, that is really when I became aware of, all of the details. It was really, I think, a conversation with Commissioner Jabal and, the governor's team and the legal team around the investigation. I was not engaged in that detail, leading up to those decisions. So really when the press reports came out, and then obviously when certain announcements were made by the governor and Chief of Staff Mounds and Commissioner Jabal, that's really when I became more aware of the details around the investigation.
Understandable. So, what do you think could have been done to identify this problem earlier?
So I appreciate the question. Hard for me to speak to that because I was not in the roles. I was not at OPM. But I think what I can speak to is, the steps that we are taking now to ensure that this type of situation does not occur again. We take the transparency of these programs very seriously. The separation of audit functions from the actual administration of the program very seriously, and so ensuring that those were separated out when the program came back to us is critically important. And then again, communicating all of the processes and procedures that are in place, and leaving no room of interpretation for those processes within our state construction team is essential. And then again, a refresher on all of our ethics trainings, and also equally as important, allowing our employees to ask questions and having that engaging conversation about various situations that may come up in the course of their business. So it's difficult for me to speak about, the what ifs and the how to prevent. And my focus is really on how to prevent this from happening again.
And completely understandable. Mm-hmm. And and that's sort of one of the reasons why I'm asking these questions is so we can understand what happened and A, and then B, of course, what the agency can do to avoid things like this in the future, especially now that school construction is back at DAS. Now, in the course of the criminal investigation, have you been interviewed?
I have not.
Do you know if anybody in the agency has?
I'm not. I do not know. I do not know.
Okay.
To clarify, I imagine that's all part of the process, but to the best of my knowledge, I'm not aware of who has been or who has been engaged. And I do want to be cautious of questions around the federal investigation.
Completely understandable, and I'm trying to be cautious too. So I'm actually going to stop at this point. I don't want to take you too far into an area where you can't actually comment, but I appreciate your answers. Like I said, I don't necessarily envy you at this point. I'll be honest, I'm a little bit concerned that, we've seen other folks within the administration and within the agencies, plural, DAS and OPM, who were close to this. Many have since left or, have been dismissed. And I'll be honest, and this isn't necessarily a commentary on you, but I'm a little bit concerned that someone who was close to it is here before us today to be, the next commissioner. And again, that's not your fault. It just is. But I don't want to take us in a direction where you can't answer questions. So I appreciate your time. I wish you the best of luck as you try to clean things up. And Senator, that's all I have at this time. Thanks very much.